Good morning. So the other day I was browsing around, surfing around on YouTube. Do you browse or do you surf on YouTube? Or do you flick or do you scroll? I don't know, I'm not sure what you do, but whatever it is you do, I was doing it. I came across this young fellow. I sound like a really old guy, but he was a young fellow. In fact, people in the comments were saying, wow, what a smart young fellow. And he was very smart, but he was also giving out some questionable advice. Young fellow goes by Passive Income Investor, I believe is his handle, and he was talking about the difficulty buying properties for investment right now in the current market conditions because they don't cash flow. And he talked about the advantages of buying a REIT instead. He was wearing a red shirt and a red tie, very striking, talking 100 miles an hour. Quite the engaging fellow. Today, let's talk a little bit about that idea, buying a REIT instead of buying investment properties. Is it a good alternative? I do not plan, this is not going to be a review of REITs. It's not going to be a tutorial on REITs. We're coming at this from the perspective of, are REITs a valid alternative to investing in real estate? Let's talk about that after this.
Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air at that time. Don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat on my skin takes me back to the time met you on a Friday.
All right, so first off, what is a REIT? For those of you who may not be familiar with REITs, a REIT, R-E-I-T, is a real estate investment trust. Concept is a bunch of people throw their money in the form of shares into a pool, and then the people who run the company, who own the company, the REIT, they take all of that money and they buy, develop, manage, and sometimes sell real estate. And in a REIT, a REIT can own things like these big, beautiful new purpose-built apartment buildings behind me. You, as a real estate investor, are probably not going to buy a building like that. But if you buy shares in a REIT, the REIT might own a building like that and manage it. In fact, they do. That one's owned by Killam, or at least partly owned and managed by Killam. I think RioCan might have a share. Not privy to the full breakdown. But you are probably not going to be able to buy a building like that. So, buying shares in a REIT sounds like a great alternative. You get to own things like that. This theater complex I'm looking at, the Chapters and Starbucks over there. These are the types of buildings, the shopping mall over there. These are the types of things that a REIT might own. So it sounds appealing. Buy shares in a REIT instead of directly owning real estate. Today I'm talking about publicly traded REITs, not privately held REITs. I'm talking about publicly traded REITs where you can buy small dollar value, small numbers of shares. You can spend $100 buying shares if you want to. In a privately held REIT, they're usually going to have a minimum amount that you have to invest of $25,000 or $50,000, $100,000. It's not the same thing as buying shares in a publicly traded REIT. Buying shares in a REIT is investing in a company. So the value of your shares and the value of the company may or may not increase or decrease based on the value of the real estate that the REIT owns. If you think about it, if you invest in some other company like Coca-Cola or Esso or Chapters or Canadian Tire or a mining company, these companies all own some real estate and they own other assets. And so technically by owning shares, you kind of own those assets. But the value of your investment goes up and down based on people's confidence in the company, which is usually related to how well the company is doing, but it is not a direct relationship. The company will go up and down in value, your shares will go up and down in value based on what people are willing to buy and sell the shares for, which may or may not be directly proportional to the value of the held real estate or whatever the other assets are, depending on what you're looking at. The thing is, with buying shares in a big company, with most of the other sectors, virtually all of the other sectors aside from real estate, it's much more difficult for you to, as an alternative, invest directly in the underlying sector. In real estate, you can buy real estate. It's quite accessible. The banks will lend you money to buy real estate. It's a little bit harder to buy a fleet of aircraft or a lithium battery factory or a brewery or a bank And this is why people like Mr. Passive Income Investor, and there are, if you start Googling REITs sorry, not Googling. Did I say Googling? Well, I guess it is Google. Google bought YouTube. So in a way you are Googling when you search on YouTube. You're YouTubling. If you type REIT into the search bar, you'll find all kinds of, smart people talking about REITs and maybe going deep dive into individual REITs or strategies for investing in REITs, and some talking about investing in REITs compared to investing directly in real estate. They still call it investing in real estate, and they compare it to being a real estate investor. You can watch lots of content on this topic, and the reason is because it is valid to talk about investing directly or indirectly in real estate, whereas that same comparison isn't really possible or practical in most other industries. Let's get back to Mr. Passive Income Investor's comments about cash flow. What prompted him to do the video talking about buying shares in REITs instead of buying property directly is the fact that right now in Ontario, and this is the case through most of North America, if you're watching this from pretty much any market in North America, it will apply, I would think, at this time, that property prices are so high that if you buy an investment property right now, rent everything out in that property, even at market rent, you will probably have, or there's a good chance you'll have, negative cash flow on a monthly basis. And Mr. Passive Income Investor is pointing that out as the number one reason it just doesn't make sense to buy property, because you're negative, you're maybe losing money. I don't think he actually goes as far as to say you're losing money, because he knows better, and at the end of his video he makes comments that make it clear that he does actually know better. But he says that his main driver in recommending REITs versus buying property is cash flow. I hear this argument a lot about real estate investing. This topic comes up a lot with investment gurus and even people who do invest in real estate. They tell you the number one thing is to make sure the cash flow is positive. But I want you to think about this for a second. People who advocate buying shares in a REIT or investing in the stock market more generally versus being a real estate investor, they often talk about cash flow. But they also advocate very often dollar cost averaging and other ways of investing in the stock market, whereby you're putting in money every month over time rather than having a whole chunk of money. A lot of people don't have a big chunk of money to throw into investments right up front. Take $100 out of your paycheck every month or every week and buy shares in something, and you get the benefit of what they call dollar cost averaging. You're buying some shares low, some shares high, but in the end, when you do that, it tends to work out that you acquire most of your shares at a good price, or at a price that beats the average, let's put it that way. But think about this. If you are if you're spending $500 a month buying shares in a REIT or something else, because you don't have $50,000 up front to buy a property, what is your cash flow in that REIT? Well, even if the REIT is returning 10% annually, and you spend $500 a month buying shares in a REIT, you will have put in $6,000 over the course of a year. Without worrying about compound interest, just keeping things simple. If it's 10% interest, call that $600 that you're going to get as a return on that investment in the first year, $600 on the $6,000 you invested. But what's your cash flow? You spent $500 a month putting it into this investment. Your cash flow is negative $5,400 for the year. So people who diss real estate investing when the cash flow is negative don't seem to have a problem with dramatically negative cash flow buying shares in either a REIT or any other vehicle that you want to buy. So they are missing the main benefits of investing in real estate. Cash flow is only one benefit, and if you're a person who has a solid income from other sources, you probably don't want strong positive cash flow because it's going to nail you on your taxes. You would rather simply enjoy the benefits of leverage and having the tenants pay down the rest of the value of the property for you, because you're only putting in 20% of the value up front. There are good reasons potentially to invest in a REIT. It's a hands-off investment. You don't have to manage it yourself. You don't have to go and fix toilets. You don't have to worry about lousy tenants. The investment is more liquid than a direct property investment. In other words, if you want to sell your shares in a REIT, you just click on your online brokerage, boing, and they're sold. Mind you, in these crazy, in this crazy real estate market, if you wanted to dispose of a property that you held directly, doesn't take very long to do that either. It's not a click of a button. It's not 2 seconds. It might take you, including the whole process, might take you a few weeks. But the premise of the argument for buying a REIT instead of a property was that property prices are so high, we're in a crazy seller's market. So it seems a little disingenuous to say, well, now it's not a very liquid investment. I mean, the whole reason you're looking at REITs is because the market's too crazy for sellers of properties. So if you really did want to sell one, you'd easily be able to sell it. And come on, if you are patiently investing your money over years to build wealth, I don't think it's going to bother you to take a few weeks to sell a property. Real estate investing is not for everyone. You, first off, need a sizable chunk of money up front for your down payment to buy a property. Some people just simply don't have that. You do need to manage tenants, or if you are going to be doing a different model of investing in real estate, flipping or whatever else, I would argue flipping isn't really investing in real estate. That's a topic for another video. When you're flipping, you're not really investing, you are buying and then selling quickly, which isn't really making an investment. And you don't have to take my word for it. Go to the Canada Revenue Agency's website, start searching around what's going to happen to you if you flip a lot of properties. You'll find they're going to look at you as a business and you're going to pay income tax on the income you make from doing that. So the big difference between real estate investing and doing something like buying shares in a REIT is that real estate investing, the benefits of real estate investing, the growth in your real estate investing is not contingent on appreciation. That's right, you heard it here first, folks. If the value of your properties does not go up, real estate investing can still be very lucrative. If the value of your REIT shares does not go up, it's not lucrative at all. They're not the same thing. You really cannot compare these two vehicles. Mr. Passive Income Investor points out that with REITs, you get dividends. Well, with properties, you get rent. And typically, rental income is going to be a lot more than dividends. He talks about tax advantages. He says when you sell your properties, you're going to pay capital gains tax. Well, yes, that's true. But when you sell your shares, if they've gone up in value, you're also going to pay capital gains tax. So that's a wash. And perhaps the bigger benefit on the capital gains front is that for you to continue to leverage yourself up and grow your wealth, or even use some of your wealth when you get into your later years, you just want to use some of the money that you have built up and invested over your lifetime. With real estate, there are ways to do that without paying any capital gains. Whereas with shares in a REIT, you'll have to sell them to get the money, and you're going to pay capital gains tax. You're going to pay tax on the capital gains. With real estate, there are various ways to refinance it, other ways to extract equity and use the cash without paying tax on capital gains. So, I am not here today to bash REITs. I am not here to say really anything good or bad about REITs. So the point is, the question, should I be a real estate investor? Should I invest in real estate directly or buy shares in a REIT? Is really the wrong question, because buying shares in a REIT doesn't really compare to real estate investing. Buying shares in a REIT compares more directly to buying shares in something else. So the correct question is, do I want to be a real estate investor, or do I not want to be a real estate investor? I would rather buy shares in whatever ventures I want to, including, if I like the real estate sector, REITs. That's it for today, folks. Thank you very much for watching. There are 89 of you who have subscribed and are part of this little group. I really appreciate every one of you. I can't believe I'm getting close to 100 subscribers. For those of you who are watching who have not signed up, if you like talking about real estate, by all means, please subscribe. Love to have you on board, and I will see you in the next video.